Oh yeah, gom des jabra tangbo soxing se tab an du zi be jang che uk jung dan long jong dan bidin exercise dan da ni an du zi be jang de che chi shu as ne ma de zen la churan zo gom jab shu ta.
So, could you visualize a married field and along with breathing exercise to nectar purification, and I will read and then give some comments on some sections.
Ta de ne uk la sim ne do na ane thanga ja de uk jung gom ja sum ma du ga la ya de ne su zu ka zu ja de na jam na ri sum cha sum che o de zen de ja jos.
Now, if you're able to identify your breathing in and out, then rest on the breath and count the breath 3 times 3, and recall, and then remain in the still space that follows that. And after that, if thoughts arise, do 3 times 5, and do the same thing, remain in stillness. And after that, if thoughts arise again, do 3 times 7, please.
ane jik ta tama de la jik kalhang la sim jik shidi do ba su ngone ta tanda ta ngone ngara jiure sha samsam ga dinde yongu do ta de zu test de ngwe sim na odi ji ngwe sim na ya wo.
If you feel sense of elation, joy, which is also at the same time not excitation, elation, but nevertheless it's elation but serene, and be able to recognize it.
Oda dinde su sim gi digi dang tanda nganzu lu gi ne dan tu za ane ngwe sim da sedi la joye ni gi dowa sim je mi dang tundu da mangbo chi gi ka den la dene chung sha sama de ngwe sim che la.
Also come to realize that this sense of well-being that you have now that you have experienced is also received due to the contributions you have received from people related to you and all other unrelated who nevertheless make huge contribution.
Ta dine khunzu gi ka din chin khunzu ka din chin bu tin su dungye se dewa ko ta dungye se ande dungye da thebe ning ji khunzu la dungye da ning ji sambo je ta wa samji thamje la mi ba.
And thus uh, feel grateful and remember their kindness and be one okay, and also realize the time to repay their kindness, because these very incredibly kind beings, while making such a great deal of contribution, in fact are caught in suffering, and feel empathetic to them and have compassion.
Ta dungye da dungye gi dan che dungye gi ju timu de zi mari ba timu de zi mari bo to wa cha la to ni ne ba to cha dan sim je dan je dungye dan thebe chi de ne nge dungye gi thewa da dungye gi ju la thebe chi de ta 동이 와도 또 대주다 동이 공부이 닝제 타네 동이 또야 동이 고미야글로야 슈글리 숑나야 원라.
Therefore, I'm going to now do my best to overcome their suffering, and particularly address the source of suffering, the causes of suffering. And the source of suffering ultimately lies in their grasping at inherent or true existence. And then so in order to free sentient beings from their suffering, I'm going to meditate on emptiness, and then this strong wish to meditate on emptiness is driven by sense of compassion that you have felt for sentient beings. Next, observe what this I meditating is like.
Tanga tendi de denju takwa ro shinawa shagdo na tadi yamares. Ane gyunde ki denju ngane gyujen la dendi chungwa re sadi. Gyujen la dendi chungwa yinzang tendi de de yamare gyuwa togo yore sadi. Samlo tes tangshu.
And if it looks like it has some kind of abiding, enduring nature, then say to yourself, it's mistaken because it is okay, because it comes to the being depending on causes and conditions. Therefore, due to the force, due to the law of dependent arising of causes and conditions, it can't be.
Tiki kina tuzi yudu de lamringi chiwa midawo kumya ke tsawa sum gyunze ku tajiwa sum sayadande dwa. Hodo zo re re che samudana tuzi yudu. Samudana tuzi medi tsawa sum di samudana ya wore. Chiwa ngiyo namjingi mi. Chiwezi chwe mado kanka jen pingi mado se tika dula de samudana dana. Awa
So when you have time at your disposal, when you feel naturally, so now here, in order to understand how that is the I is changing, it is useful to recall three roots, so the three broad sections of impermanence and death in lumbering meditation. The three broad sections are: death is certain, that time is uncertain at the time of death, but nothing but Dharma is a benefit. So you could still go through the three main broad sections, and if you have time, you could consider three justifications for each of these.
Tadine ni Hongula deme tunshingi onjuwa botabu yungul wata na wachi yorwa tiya nguwesi na tiya yor marayasi jumzen kharasi na ane chashe la tenpa tendi resi kharasi na ane chashe kangba lakwa pungbo jenjik chedu ane kangla jenjik chedu ane nga jenjik chewa chedan chashe dela deme ki onjuwa bochi mindu jawa shuk chimbo shawjire shaas chashe imbe jumzen chashe la tenpa de hakona chashe la medembe rao wan juwa bo tabe de me cha dora tik dora da.
So with this, when you realize that the self is impermanent, and what is that self impermanent self like? If it presents a character of being self-sufficient, substantially existing, then remind yourself it can't exist self-sufficiently and substantially because it is very much related with the aggregate. It is inextricably related to the aggregates and their functions. Aggregates are parts. For example, with the birth of the aggregates, the self is said to have been born. With the birth of the limbs, the self is said to have been born. And with the things, when aggregates perform a function, self is said to have performed that function. So self is not unrelated. It's very much related on its part, on the parts on which it is designated. So due to the force of this dependent arising of parts, feel that self is not independent in its performance of function as well. Not only is it not self-sufficient, it can't be independent.
다들 그 파원 조부 그 데메트신 아주 매장 데메트신이 랑원에 술도네 두된 거지 랑원에 그러 근데지 랑원에 두가지 연구여러 왔다 데 나와 연구여러 왔대 다 대야민도 랑원에 두면도 또배 파다자면서 민장 따위자면서 스타디파 파다자면서 르파 샤자면서 유용원에지 밀레고리샤스다 와 어디에도 상 발음 레징에는 발음대도 안되네 급제지가라는 제일 상 먹보다 좋으로
Indeed, self-sufficient, substantially existing self as being different from the aggregates and having a control or domain over doesn't exist. However, there is still a self that exists being differently, yet existing, yet existing from within the aggregates. There's an inherent, although it's different, but it still exists inherently from within the aggregates. So as if self can be found from among the aggregates. However, say to yourself, it's it's wrong appearance. Self does not, such an self doesn't exist inherently from within, objectively from within the aggregates. It exists entirely by being labeled externally by naming concepts. So its existence from its object's own side is zero. And of course, you can then later on think about the reasons why.
다 된대게 풍부 때문에 풍부라 때문에 때문에 랑원에 두어지 나와이나 나와 요된죠 수sem나라 차나 요된죠 제고 제제제제니 제니 니에요 말에다로 제니 니에요 말에다 풍부 속바당 차셰당 예라당 양라니 탑 지난 풍부라다 제 매우 찾아라 가서 나온도 풍부라 데메다 사로 야 풍부 다연도 딱 그런 거도 찍도 토마토 가르도 되나 제니 많이 대단히 된다와데 템바투 랑원에도 템바투와 테 많이와 대랑 아니 나게 띵게 동반이 가서 다음에 터머스티 대단히 두스테나 야보다 다 민두스 시즌 이제 다디 네 셈나라 차든지 자자자 제제제는 미니웨 차라 동상 티각베 각자식 거 동반이 있어야 돼 봐. 근데 나랑은 저 각 꽉 잠들라 동반이 있어요. 제가 그런 나 다녀야 돼요. 나 그런 거 어디 가래 라는데 어디 아니 당연히 집에 동반이 그래서 어디 다들 싫은 분은 수동바오 동반이 수소서다 다되나시 나 동바오 동반이 나오 수자시는 되거라 그래서 제 니니 오직 똑같아 되는 거라 수동바오 수주 어디 근데 뭐를 동아리나시 나 다녀야 어디 당연히 집에 뭐 동아리 아니 나 동반이 된 아래스 라면데 nga rangwene tuwe tongba ti ngobo tagarang ane nga ge ngobo res ngobo chik bara res la goram shiya tongba nyi te nga re la ge yomata ngobo chik re la ngobo chik la togba thade di nyi ngobo chik la togba thade tenga o di nga zo tanda di shingi yomare tanda di ma shenpa yinza ane nga zo nyokda da di tere nyokda sonyi toji.
So we need to be able to have as clearer appearance as possible of I not existing from its own side and therefore being empty of inherent existence. To establish its emptiness, first of all, we need to have we need to have before our mind's eye clearer appearance of the object of negation, the subtle object of negation. Once you have a clear picture of that, then you investigate it and see whether it exists objectively 100% from its own side or inherently 100% from its own side. In what way? If it exists, either it must be unitary, inherently unitary, not existing, not dependent on others, or it must be pluralistic with others. It can't be found in either form. It in fact exists depending on Tokpa collection on parts. And therefore, when you examine as much as possible, as thoroughly as possible, you experience a certain disappearance of the previously palpable inherent existence. With a certain disappearance before your mind's eye of that, then Dongseng means an emptiness, a spacious, kind of a vacuous space, which is emptiness of inherent existence, will appear, and then you remain still in that. And so this spacious and vacuous state of emptiness is the nature of the nominal I. The nominal I, no. when you examine what is the actual nature of the nominal I, its actual nature its ultimate nature is not existing from its own side. Not existing from its own side, and therefore there ensues emptiness. That's why in Heart Sutra it says Suktongpo, form is empty. Emptiness is form. Now you could replace form with I and say I is, or I, let's say the I is empty. The emptiness of I, the emptiness is emptiness is I. So emptiness of I, emptiness I doesn't mean emptiness has become I, rather I not existing from I's own side is emptiness. It's emptiness of I. So I and its emptiness are inseparable by nature. You can't distinguish, but in terms of their nature, they are more segments of the same nature of one entity, but different dogma means isolates or different nominal terms. In terms of entity, you can't split, but it can be split in terms of nominal terms, which has been translated as dogmatade. And this conflation of the nominal terms, and then believing that I exist inherently is what makes all the nocturnist problems.
다 다딘데 다디 거지기 리버 망부지 유엔나게 아니 남두니 리버 알아야디다 리버 게다 치슈당 리버네라 키슈 제 남두니 리버 세
So there are many ways of establishing emptiness of this I, and one such famous line of reasoning is 7-point analysis, 7-point investigation.
다디 당에 날라 지단 남두 리버디 다 우마주베 날라 겨보시다 요래 다 자와도 전날라 단다 아니 이나다 디 인지 수카세우로 디 당엘레 신용부 날라 남두인디 아니 카세우스요 다딩에마 랍샤나 베나두스레다 안당어서 타녀디 왜 nga지어봐 먼저 땅 알아서 nga 곰객이 요스기 튕기어봐 이나야 아니 틴데 미그바디 텔라믹 한 넘버 가르샤용 거라도 아니 nga디 봉보 되메게 랑원에 도 자자자리 유중원에 수줍된 요지 나와 샤용 거래 나와 샤와디 짐바이나 근데 짐바들라 아니 간사가 단지 탐모라고 요래 다 어디스라고 요래
So before we go through 7-point analysis, first of all, Tanya the I that is observed to investigate its nature is the nominal I. Okay, the nominal I. And now, what is number? Number means how it is. The I that is looked at is the nominal I, and number means how it is seen to be. How it is seen to be. It is seen to be independent. Term means non-dependent or independent, objectively objectively existent within the aggregates. Such an I will appear. The I will appear like that, and that appearance would be, or the existence of I in that way is a subtle object of negation. And if one grasped, if one believed that it is true, that appearance of I is true, that is subtle grasping at self or persons.
당저 뒤체디 다디 짐바디 신 캐고라 셰고라 당보다 유지까지 캐고래 안데 된데 다 최진에서 와 최진에서 와
유다 캐고 서 nga 최진
나 최진에서 당당 안저 셈날 란신이 도 랑원에 도 데모도 난게도 어디 마투 데스타 란신이 마투
랑신게 마투 랑
마투 데스타로
마투 때랑
다 좀전 가래라나 아니
당보디는
당보디로와 당보 좀전 뒤고 왔다 되노라 네, 저 풍보당스러워. 저 풍보다라신 찍도요 마루.
러스. 그 풍보다랑 오케이. 그 풍보당라신
찍도요 마루.
So now so that grasping, okay, that grasping is subject, okay, subject. Well, anyway, that grasping at true inherent existence must be now eradicated. It's a that makes the problem, and the source of the problem must be addressed by eradicating that grasping. And you say to yourself, this okay, present this logical statement, such an I, not a nominal I, such inherently existing I, Rangunne Matupte does not exist by itself, in itself 100%. Why? It doesn't exist inherently one with the aggregate. Step one, because it doesn't exist one with the aggregates. No. So what is the base of the negation, everybody? The basis of negation is nominal I. So that nominal I doesn't exist inherently, and we are giving reasons.
저 풍보다 란신 찍도 마tuk체.
란신 찍도 마tuk.
니와데 저 풍보당 란신 타데데 마tuk스와. 찍다 타데 니 차송아. 두 삼단들이고.
Secondly, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist inherently distinct from aggregates or different from Rangshin Tade Dumatup.
니차송아. 다디 풍보다 란신이도 파데마 많이 봐. 풍보 란신도 추데마 많이 파덴 수데 많이 봐. 두 삼단의 배진 답디라. 니 시차로다.
So now 3 and 4. Self doesn't inherently
랑신이 풍보라 다데 템바 많이 봐. 아니 랑신이 풍보양 땡드 추 많이 봐. 그럼 파데마 많이 봐. 풍보 추 템바 많이 봐. 어디로다?
So 3 and 4. Self, inherently existing self, doesn't depend on aggregates. That's number 3. Pardon? Inherently existing self doesn't depend on the aggregates. Number 4. Aggregates also do not depend on the inherent I. Partin sutin long.
당아와데 가르스는 란신기도에 추이 풍부단 덴바 덴바 칸도야마도로.
So the self, okay, inherently existing self doesn't possess the aggregates inherently either.
아와시 나 두바디 아니 그 풍부 촉바잠데 란신기 두 촉바잠데 다 촉바잠데 다디 페제 촉바잠라신 데란 인지미지란 시자고 말해다 촉바잠데 다 말아 촉바잠데 뭐 촉바저로 뒤에 다 많이 봐.
6. The collection of aggregates is not the self. It's not that I.
다 듬바데 촉베 입수 말어 봐. 근데 입지여 봐. 입데 네 다도 말어 봐슬라. 입데.
So 7. The shape of the collection of aggregates. The shape of the collection of aggregates is not the I. It's not that I.
다디 리버 드윈디 타동나 아니 텐덴지 리발라 토그레스 노 송여다. 야.
So these 7 are reasons, and now when you rather ultimately these 7 reasons or reasonings trace back to or boil down to dependent arising reason.
다디 단다 가서 겨울무친 봐. 겨울무친 돈이 당보 떠야디 아니 디 카도 공부라세 저무진 유 공부라세 슝디 대화저와 남dun지 리베게 대화저와 뭐죠 디 카도딜라네 돈이 따와 똑바디 송고도
His Holiness the Dalai Lama has mentioned that he came to understand selflessness of a person when going through 7-point analysis or investigation as explained in Lama Tsongkhapa's writing called Elucidation of Thought. Gongpa rapsel.
단단데 우마주가 자와데레 테니로와 테니 두 직된도 테니
So anyway, now please, the stanza that there's a stanza for which pertains to this, and it says deni doyang
직된도스
no jigdendu deni doyang jigden doyang.
야 네.
Let's take it to the
네 페이트 말아
let's take
나 가득 인지 주시한디가
let's
제가 테니 되냐 직된도 넘버 든지 두줄 매매지 남제 매가 직된 일레디 랑이 연라데네 또바 인사시도.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama found this stanza from Madhyamika Avatara. He found this stanza from Madhyamika Avatara very helpful, where he says Deni, that means the inherent I. Certainly, inherent I is not established. Certainly, inherent I is not established as being as so. Okay, certainly inherent I is not established. Okay, ultimately, the Newton means ultimately, or conventionally, by Namdun by 7-point analysis. Yet Namje Mabra Jitin Dile Dir Rangi Yela Latin Tokbayin. Yet without any analysis in this world I or the chariot as an example. I or the chariot as an example is documents affixed, labeled, dependent on its parts. Shall I do it again? Translation? No translation? Repeat? Shall I repeat? Okay. So I feel better too. The translator feels better. Denim is it. Okay. It is not established either ultimately or mundanely or conventionally by 7-point analysis. Okay. Yet without any analysis, depending on its parts, it is posited in the world. Or I'll say that, okay. But yet without analysis, in this world, I said that in past time, in this world, in this world, it is posited, it is labeled, dependent on its parts. Is it okay now? Wow, it's a nice commentary.
What did you say?
Long là tăng còn
That di khaduk di la di ta jidan tsik di thondar gombarab se khaduk tsik jiyorwa. Di da thanda jawar machine gi ne tongni gi tawa thongma ngwe song se gombarab se tsik thanda umaju be khagi da di tsik di thanda do shesa de dir gombarab se nang khande sona khansan che wa aswa khansan.
So now in the commentary of Lama Tsongkhapa, where His Holiness found the view of emptiness, now he says, Kangsa Jeba, what is called
Gongba
Long Gongba Rapsel. So in the Gongba Rapsel, okay, Kangsa Jeba, what is called person?
Pungbu Tsokba Dang.
Now Tekishla.
Kangsa Jeba, Pungbu Tsokba Dang. Pungbu Chashe Dang. Tsokba Dang, Chashe Yun Kanyang, Nye Tsinshir, Jogyumes.
Tsokba Dang,
Kangsa Jeba, Pungbu Tsokba Dang, Pungbu Chashe Dang. Pungbu Gyun, Pungbu Chashe Dang. Tsokba Dang, Chashe Gyun.
Chashe Gyun.
Kanyang, Nye Tsinshir.
Kangyang Long.
Jogyumes.
So that's it says what is called person cannot be posited, cannot be established on the continuum of on the continuum of parts of aggregates. Okay, what is called person cannot be posited on the continuum and parts of the aggregates. No, Jogyumes.
차진 풍부당스러워. 풍부 차시엘레 신도왕 녜친시 조규메에서. 차진 풍부당 풍부 차셰레
풍부
차셰레 셴두왕
셴두왕
아이 신시 조규메스다.
I cannot be posited alternatively differently. I cannot be posited differently from Pungbu judgments. The whole okay Pungbu judging Pungbu. Sorry, I cannot be posited differently from different from the aggregates which the charging point. I cannot be posited different from the aggregates as a whole, nor aggregate individually, individual constituent aggregates.
어디 딱 오므라세 슝직 네 가도라네 자르음지마 투삼신도 다 뒤중게 나세 따데 민도스러와 담아제디 단데 따데 민도 삼베 아니 저와 당보도 뒤도 충주송도 아마 세라라 공부라세 티르 어디 가도 뒤도 송송아.
So when His Holiness read this section of the commentary at this juncture, all of a sudden it occurred to him what is normally called I not exist, doesn't exist, and he mentioned about this for the first time when giving teaching at Sara Monastery.
다디네 아니 다스즈 풍부제제제니 많이 나나나 나요 말외라나 아니 단다디 당기 우마주베 식타마다 랑게 연라데네 독바 인송도 세상 나세야데다 단다제제제니 많이 베이나 아니 나 메버베스나 탄예데베 나데 요레스 유단 칸데스나 랑게 연라라 데네 풍봉하고 가른라 데네 딱삼 데네 바다고스 세상은도 간상의 친이를 도인 봐. 다시 부모하고 가는라 때네 따선데 간상의 친이를 봐. 제가 디요레 제가 랑기 연라데네 독바 인사도 오데 디직디 누가 좀 다녀디요 두고도.
So if you employ the 7-point reasoning and also consider roughly translated statements from clear elucidation of thought, and as well if you then that means if you look for okay, for that concrete inherent existence of I, existing objectively somewhere among the aggregates. When you look for it dispassionately, without any prejudgment and biases, just dispassionately look for it. And then when you end up not finding it, because it will not be found and it will be followed by, as I said before, vacuous space of emptiness. Now, doesn't mean now the I doesn't exist. Doesn't mean the inherent I doesn't exist in the nominal I. Doesn't mean that the absence of inherent I in the nominal I mean that I doesn't exist at all. Not at all. I do exist. I does exist. in the aftermath of deconstruction by applying 7-point analysis, you have to be able to establish that I, although doesn't exist inherently, still does exist quite effectively, recalling the last line of the stanza translated from Mathematical Avatar. Rangen Yanla Deno Tokpayin. I is designated designated dependent on its parts, and parts are Dakshik Pungbunga, the 5 aggregates, which are the basis of a labeling I. Remember, the definition of a person or persons. Definition of persons is I. See, definition of persons is I, dependently or merely dependently labeled on the collection of 5 aggregates. So that's what is left.
tanda di tsik di tanda rawa shitoda shewe na uma jigwa teni tingi duwa jikden duwa la rawa namba dungi dhubjur mi ji la rawa teni siya de ta tanda nga zo tanya de we gaa jigwa tujin dila kogo me rawa te ane tingi duwa jikden duwa sute pechen tuyandam de rawa ta dhuya yo ma res rango nga zo tanya de we ninju nga zo tanya de we nga zo samna dangi yor de le ane tanzi paja wangi nga zo la dadu tuwa nangi yor re 다도 좋아난데 요게 텐데게 ene 다도 좋아데 엔직된도 두고 말해서 김제 가래서나 넘버 든지 제제제네 ene 니야요 말해서 넘버 든지 두주를 미미지스로 다 덴데 된담데 ene 넘버 든지 제제네 다 니가 말해들래 나 매워 말해서나 아니 나 매워 말해서 나 요레스 남제 매와 직된이래 돼서 다 파타시 파 가서래 마다 마제베치라고 저러 마다 마제베치 아니 직딩이 다녀나랑 안저 나세야 돼나 레치기요 나 곰제기요 나세야지 직딩들 요레스 데 요야데 나데 칸데지 요레스나 아니 랑게 연라데네 또고 인사데 랑게 풍풍하고 가는라 때네 딱에 나지 직딩들 요레스 디 요장 전담게 나데 아니 두야요 말에 전담 나데 넘버 2 줍제네 이게요 말해들래 이나 팁 매장 매고 말해 직딩 감들래 직딩들 나세야디 요레스 어딘데르지 디직디 고용고도 하다 전다도도라고 하시던데 레용고도
So I'd like to briefly comment on the stanza from Mathematical Avatar that His Holiness found instrumental for his realization of emptiness, which was roughly translated by the translator. And then I like to comment on this. When it says Deni Diniduam, Deni means Deni refers to the nominal I, because it's the nominal I that is used, that is held, that is the topic of investigation. So Deni means the nominal I. Diniduam means ultimately. It doesn't it is not okay. Deniduam means inherently or ultimately, because ultimately or inherently are the same here. So nominal I is not established by 7-point analysis as existing inherently and therefore ultimately, nor conventionally, so no jigdinto. That means convention, because when you can't, you conventionally means the nominal I cannot be deconstructed by employing 7-point analysis. If you do that, then it will really become nihilistic. Anyway, so it's not established either inherently or conventionally. So, uh, so when you look in this way, Nigimari means that inherently existing I cannot be found. Cannot be found. Then does it mean the I has ceased? Now that I, that nominal I, has ceased to be, does it mean I doesn't exist? It exists. Why? How does it exist? With without investigation in this very world, dependent on its parts, it is posited. It is posited, dependent on its parts. Now, it is because of this, because of the last two lines, that we say, I am doing this, I am meditating, I am learning, and so on. Such agent of affective I, effect, such actions, sorry, such agent of these actions are labeled on the aggregates, and then what doesn't exist though is this I merely labeled dependent on the aggregates, does not at all exist inherently, as is established by 7-point analysis. The nominal I does exist, or does exist. I'm trying to make strong. No, does exist. Okay, does exist.
It does exist.
Okay. It does exist, but it doesn't exist inherently. No.
差不多。어디 단도 단다 신다는데 도대다 말랍다 샤주.
Although there are some issues to be addressed, we'll stop here.
是吧？这个是忙不快，忙不单到马定手了，小快忙不要了的，这可能他们的东西考了的。
So, let's not go too deep, otherwise we will get drowned.
东西多还是能别杀了啊，东西多能别杀我的。
So, because if you get drowned, you might realize emptiness in drowning.
那么，我们他上多，
No.
我们他上来的，我们我生命他上得了的，就是他这都是写了人物当过来去了，写了人物呢就他们我东西光讲意思了，
Yes.
安尼，当把嘛草嘛吹着的，他就是卡斯坤的团员意思了，我卡斯这边机卡斯坤的嘛团员意思了，可是东西多，安尼。国满他上是民我都是讨厌死我了，国忙不是呢，真的那些卡斯坤的团员我的，这边生的嘛，他就是团员我了，我们东西多年就是。哎哦，他的国忙我实际是的是多看的了，看的是那他的卡斯坤的团员我的，这边生卡斯坤的团员我了，都是钱的国满他上是讨的，的那些，哎，我这东西多是那个多，咱们的最热心。
So I like to keep our integrity, keep our person intact. I don't want to lose you or disappear or disappearing away from different where there are no doors. Uh, I'd like to share, which I have done in the past, is Komang Dasang, Many Door College of Japan, okay, Many Door College, Many Door, Many Door College, Komang Dasang. This in this college, they must have been reciting, reading sutras or doing practice at the end of the session. Then it was seen monks were coming coming out of coming out of walls, coming through the walls, as if there were individual doors, as if there was a door for each monk. They were coming through the wall, and people thought, "Gosh, this monastery has many doors." Well, not that is because they have understood. When you have understood emptiness, then you know matter doesn't obstruct you. You go through matter, and so I don't want to go too much into emptiness. Lest something like that should happen here.
그래서 Chandrakirti 말라가지 고마 sentrang 라가지
So Chandrakirti might lose its name. Chandrakirti, it might be called many door center or multiple door center.
라데샤
Due to the nearest of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme pure body Peter that has not arisen and rise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. May the precious pure emptiness that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Whatever slight positive potential I may have created, by paying homage, offering, and acknowledging my faults, rejoicing and requesting that the Buddha stay in peace, I now dedicate all this to full awakening.